All right, Manager Lowe.
Here. Here.
Manager Baki.
I am here.
Manager Taves. Talking.
Yeah, he's connecting to so.
Oh, okay. I'll go ahead and say President Anderson.
Present. Okay, so with Manager Taves, as soon as he connects, we'll have a full board. First item on the agenda is setting up a meeting agenda.
Madam President, managers, I'd like to recommend that we add item under new business. This is the DDA salary study presentation.
Okay, any objection? All right. We'll do that as item A2. Anything else? Okay. If not, a motion is in order to accept the agenda as altered.
I'll move that we accept the agenda as amended.
There a second? I'll second. Roll call, please.
Right, Manager Lowe.
Aye.
Manager Schmaltz.
Aye.
Manager Baki.
Aye.
Manager Taves.
Aye.
President Anderson.
Aye. Next item is the consent agenda. And without objection, I will declare the consent agenda accepted. If there are any changes or questions anyone has before we vote, bring those up. Okay, if not, a roll call,
Give me
please.
a second.
No.
Oh, okay. Manager Lowe.
Aye.
Manager Schmaltz.
Aye.
Manager Baki.
Aye.
Manager Taves.
Aye.
President Anderson.
Aye. Next is the public open forum. And I know we have some folks here. We'll introduce those in a minute. But in the public, is anyone from the public? You should be in person, but you don't see anybody, do you?
No.
Okay, we'll move on then. Next is the advisory committee update.
Aiden is not altering.
Oh, okay. He indicated. It's,
Mr. Chair.
So Madam President, managers, just, previous Tuesday, the 13th was the last citizen, advisory committee. And so there's been an update. I know, Madam President, you had attended that, along with, Randy here and, a number of others. We've gone through the St. Anthony Falls, some of the work that's being done on the Wakeful impact, study there. Discuss some of the other elements regarding the impacts of those boats. We've discussed further the planning a boat tour coming up. Looks like it's been it was Tuesday in July. And then there was also just a note that the budget process is commencing and that the committee is encouraged to continue its participation.
Anything you want to add? No? Okay. Very good. Thank you. Moving on, new business. First item is the permit 25-004 North Shore Trail presented by the city of Forest Lake. And we have many people here. So let's start with the mayor and introduce yourself, please.
Blake Roberts, newly elected mayor here at Forest Lake. We're here to speak to this. This is a big project for us. It's one of our largest projects we've done in Forest Lake for in years. Millions of dollars. So our engineer or our administrator, who is an engineer, will help kind of walk through this. But we have council member
Kevin Miller, and I'm the newest appointee to the council, and I've been on planning in the city of Forest Lake for about 14 and a half years, and I am your liaison to the Forest Lake Comfort Lake watershed.
Welcome, nice to meet you.
I'm Lake Erickson, Forest Lake. Chamber members, council members, it's about 2022. And yeah, just here to see how this unfolds, and it is a big project.
Mhm.
Just
Well, thank you.
I'm Mark Stotts. I'm the newly minted city administrator. I've been here about 3 months. As Mayor Roberts alluded to, I am an engineer by background. Worked for Bonestro and Stantec at one point in my career. Spent 7 years as the Centerville city administrator and city engineer. And yeah, again, we're just here to chat through some of the particulars on this project, and happy to speak to anything you'd like as we go along. I don't know if you want to have the staff presentation first or.
Yes.
Sure.
Yes, we'll start with the staff presentation.
Yes, Madam President, you. But if you wanna pursue with the motion, then have the discussion, you have to do the presentation first.
Let's do the presentation.
Okay. So, we have then Dr. Andrew Wilkinson here from EUR, as well as Mike Sandiger. The two of them were the leads, liaisoning with the city for the overall project. As noted, and Terry, can we find it? Let's see, the map,
Yeah, I can. put it.
just so reference for everybody. Well, the one, I think, to the point that you made, Mark, and Mayor as well, is that this project is substantially larger than any other past city project. I think that there's a map on page 8 of the second memo.
I'm getting there.
Yeah. Try and guide you to it. So, but it will be largely a mill and overlay along with some additional work. And the staff and district engineer, along with city staff and engineer, have worked through the submittals, and then also provided a recommendation as to how to proceed. But it's as of I think yesterday or Tuesday, there was agreement on the final components, and that those have been agreed upon. So I don't know if there's more specifics that want to be discussed.
Well, I think, Anne, you should do the engineer's overview for us.
So this project is, as Mike discussed, includes roadway repaving and reclamation, minor curb installation, reconstruction of the sanitary sewer, culvert and catch basin replacements. And it will disturb about 15,000 square feet to create approximately 4,592 square feet of newly reconstructed impervious. This triggers our erosion control and our water crossings rule in particular. And we have gone through the process of reviewing the erosion control and water crossings, and there are no issues with culvert replacements that would impact upstream or downstream resources. And we have all agreed on the amount of perimeter control and catch basin and culvert protections for the erosion control.
Okay, there were some culverts that were going upsized.
Yes.
Okay.
And they've provided the necessary modeling to demonstrate that
Okay.
they wouldn't create any sort of issue with those replacements.
All right. Are there any questions from the board? No? Okay. Why don't you do your?
Sure. So first of all, I want to thank the board and the staff for working with us through this project and having a constructive back and forth. I think we've come a long ways since sort of the first iteration of our submittal and the comments back. The central issue here is that the project, while it has a few of the elements of culvert replacement and sanitary sewer work and small amounts of curb and stuff, it is 99% a reclaim, shape and pave project. Mill and overlay is a little bit of a misnomer. Reclaim, shape and pave is what we call it. It's a style of project where you grind the pavement in place and mix it with some of the gravel base underneath, and then immediately come back with a motor grader. So the big things you see grading the township gravel roads, shape it. So reclaim, shape, and then pave is the next step. They probably skip compaction in there, but so really it's reclaim, shape, compact, and pave. But what it amounts to is that the project is ground up, shaped, and then compacted all in the same operation. And so the road is really never in a disturbed state for more than a few hours at a time, while the chain of that, you can imagine it kind of works like a train, right? The reclaimer comes along, then the grader comes behind that, and then the compactor comes behind that. And the end product after just a couple hours there is a gravel road. And of course, we have gravel roads all over the watershed. We don't have perimeter control along those at any point in time, much less for a few days. And we don't see an erodible issue there. We just don't protect gravel roads, or we don't protect wetlands and lakes from gravel roads because they're just not very erodible. And that is all we are saying here, is that we don't ever have a disturbed soil condition. Of course, we do in a few of these little areas, and we've never disputed that. We've always shown proper erosion control in those locations from our initial submittal. So what we are saying is that we'd like to see, ideally, we'd like to see no perimeter control required. I understand our last submittal did have some in some, what we might call critical areas where it's a little closer to the lake or a little closer to the wetland. I want everyone to understand the financial implications of that, right? So the initial comments we got back and asked for perimeter control totaled about $43,000 of perimeter control. And again, for, you know, this is a big project, so $43,000 maybe not, doesn't seem like a lot, but for something that's going to be in place to protect what, right? To protect a gravel road from washing into a wetland or a lake, that we have gravel roads all over the place. And it's really, again, a condition for maybe a few hours while that compactor comes by. And once it's compacted, it's very, very tight. In fact, it's better than a gravel road because gravel roads don't have bituminous mixed in. So if you've ever been around or had a contractor come to your gravel road driveway, they'll say, hey, we can use some of this reclaim mix or the recycled mix, and it binds up a lot better because it's got some of that oil in it. And so our last submittal, the amount of perimeter control that was proposed and gone back and forth with totals $12,000 still. So it is still $12,000 that we still maintain is unnecessary. If it was the board's pleasure, we'd gladly just eliminate that. We still feel like that is unnecessary. However, we understand sometimes compromise is necessary. If folks feel strongly that perimeter control should be there, you know, we want to walk out of here with a permit and we want to get this project rolling. It's an important one to the community. They've been asking for it for a lot of years, right, Blake? And so we want to get this done. We just want to be fiscally responsible and not add costs where costs don't need to be added. So that's my, I just wanted to get that out there, that this is why we're having this back and forth, is because we really feel strongly that there's not a need for this perimeter control.
Okay. Anything others want to add? All right, I'm gonna go back to you, Ann, and you tell the board, this board, why you're recommending that we have it.
Sure, Tori, can you
Yep.
pull up that map that I had sent you?
Um,
So the areas in which the second submittal for erosion control from the city and these two smaller areas that we asked them to pull back in. Really are areas that are immediately adjacent to high value wetlands, the lake, or drainage channels in which the water is flowing directly under the road. We believe that although it is a reclamation project and if everything goes as planned, it's very low risk that huge amounts of sediments can be released into these water bodies. We know that construction sometimes can have elements of uncertainty and also delays or really high rains like we saw last year. And so we believe this is the most protective of the resource and within the district's jurisdiction to require this.
I live on a gravel road, so I'm fully aware of what comes at you from those. Can you talk, Ann, a little bit more about the closeness of this and why this concerns you? We've just had several days, 4 or 5 days of rain. And some of it was pretty small, you know, just drizzles, but a lot of it wasn't. And so if you can talk to that factor a little bit more.
Sure.
Okay.
And Greg is online as well if he wants to add in too, but these areas that we've identified are within 25 feet of a high value water resource and also don't have a lot of grass strip or swales to capture any sediment before it enters. So these areas really are kind of where that runoff goes in without much treatment or intervention.
Right. Okay. I assume that. But we're coming from this, I think, from a very narrow perspective, because that's our job. That's our duty. That's what the law says. And so, I do know that we've spent, almost $6 million cleaning up Forest Lake. And, it's now, not on the borderline of being listed. It is much better than it's ever been. I've driven this road many, many, many times, and I understand where those tight spots are. So from our perspective, this is necessary. It's not an add-on just to make your life miserable. So I think we can come to some agreement here so that you can move the project, because we want to. We want to have you do that project. And those of us that drive that road, almost every day, we'd like to see it fixed. But, we have to protect the water, we have to protect the wetlands, and these are high value wetlands, they're not just, you know, some little strip on the side of the road here. So, that's our duty, that's our job. My understanding, that before this meeting was that there had been, an agreement made within the last few days that narrowed the boundary from 50 feet to 25. So instead of having a double BMP or silt fence, only one is required. And that's still, what'd you say, 13, 14,000?
Yeah, around $12,000, almost 13. Yeah.
Okay. All right, so I want to throw this out to the board. We have worked with other entities, our government entity partners. We're doing joint projects. Some of the biggest ones were right here in Forest Lake in the first, 10 years of the district. Broadway Avenue, we installed iron enhanced sand filter system along that entire length. It was actually a county project, but I'm sure Forest Lake had something to do with it. And put all of that water going up to the holding pond that is in Bixby Park, right behind, I think it's right behind White Castle, one of those places right there. The other thing we did is we took the flooding that was occurring in the park right over here, Lake Park, and rerouted that around the turnaround so that it also follows that same iron enhanced sand filter process. We felt at that time that that was really necessary because we had to clean that park area up. we wanted to make sure that that water wasn't going directly into Forest Lake, but it would come up through that Dixon Park area and be filtered. And it would be held so that, you're not overloading it into the lakes either. Volume is a pollutant all by itself. So you don't want to have too high of a volume. So we're used to working with our communities to do the right thing for the assets, but also making sure that you get what you need from that management perspective for the community. So you should be working together and right from the beginning. It's better if you see it right from the beginning and not when there's a final plat or a final map and a design. So that would be something that I would encourage you to do, is to put us up at the front end of things and not at the back end, so that we can talk about these things right from the very beginning. The other thing that, I don't know how much of a burden this $12,000 is to you. But I think we can work on, if the board, our board agrees, we can work on some type of a joint program there, and some percentage. You know, we could probably pull out of one of our reserve or dedicated funds. We have a dedicated stormwater fund, and this is for folks that can't treat the water on their own site, and so they contribute. It's like a park fund, they contribute to that dedicated fund. So there are some dollars there that we can use if the board chooses to put toward this project. And it's not, again, it's not that much, but you know, if we split that, it's $6,000 each. And we get what we need to protect the water, and you get what you need, and you can proceed with the project. Does that sound agreeable?
That sounds very fair.
We'd be glad to entertain a proposal like that, yeah.
Well, then we all win. You get what you need, the water gets what it needs, and everybody's happy. So I will, the board has been following this, so if that's agreeable to you, we can pull that money from our dedicated stormwater fund and put it toward this project in a cooperative way.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
I would just note, hopefully there are other places where district funds could be obtained by your resolution establishing that fund. That's actually for permanent stormwater management facilities.
Mike Sandifer has his hand raised too.
who is it?
Mike Sandifer.
Okay, Mike Sandifer?
Thank you, President. I would ask the bidder board to consider where those funds would be coming from. These would be required practices by the permit. If we were funding the requirements for one permit, the question could be raised, should we be funding requirements for all permits? Thank you, President.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that input. Anyone else?
Yeah, I have some comments on this. I think we don't want to set a precedent, as Mike Sandifer mentioned. I think one of the things that we have a great opportunity to leverage here that we haven't in the past is trying to get earlier involvement of the watershed district involved on the city projects. And I think, Mark, since you've joined already, we've seen an increase in cooperation and interest in working together. And I think that's going to be great for both parties. And I can almost assure you that if we can get involved, had we been involved in this a year ago, I'm sure we could have gotten grants, worked out some kind of grant system, which would have provided much more than $12,000 on your project. You know, if you look at that $6 million we spent, you know, most of that was projects, and on almost every project we had an 80% grant coverage. We're the #1 grant winner in the state of Minnesota for watershed districts in the last 5 years, and we're one of the smallest watersheds. So we have very good engineering firm and a very good staff, and we're very good at getting grant funds. For example, the street sweeper you're enjoying right now was obtained through a grant by working with us through I think it was Bowser. And so that was like $300,000 or $400,000. Shields Lake program, that was covered by almost an $900,000 grant. And of course, that lake was impaired and was really the responsibility of the city to recover and restore that. And the watershed district assumed that responsibility and moved ahead. And with only 20% of the taxpayers' money, we've been able to get that project done through an 80% grant. So if we can work together earlier and collaborate, you know, on these monthly meetings and on special projects with long lead times, I'm sure we can work together and find ways to obtain grants. So I just wanted to make that point, and I think it's important that we continue to try to leverage both of our skills in getting money for our taxpayers. The other thing is that we have a rules revision program for this coming year, or maybe it's for next year, but we're working on rules revision this year, this summer. So we'll certainly take into consideration the point that you made. We're always looking to move forward with adaptive management. In fact, we've actually trying to sponsor some work right now to evaluate our rules and the impact they have and the cost value of the phosphorus that's removed. And based upon that data, you know, we may decide to shift our focus in a different direction. So I think we're being as responsible as we possibly can. We've been very responsible with our taxpayers' money, and we want to continue to do that, even to the point of looking at our rules and making changes where it makes sense for the taxpayer as well as for the water quality we're trying to protect. I guess that's the major thing I wanted to mention, those 2 points. And I appreciate, Blake, you coming to the meeting and also getting involved with this directly. And I also appreciate both of you coming and supporting the Forest Lake Association meeting. You saw we had over 200 people there. And as Blake has often said, you know, these water resources we have in the city, especially Forest Lake, is one of our greatest assets. So it's great to see that both you and Mark, as well as hopefully the city council, continue to be involved with the water quality issues we're trying to deal with here. So again, I appreciate you coming tonight, and thanks for taking the time.
Yes, Madam President, managers, I'll just note for the board, but then also for others present. So a couple of things. There's a piece in the administrator's report. So one thing that I've been asking for some number of years, but it's finally gotten some traction, is working with the University of Minnesota, St. Anthony Falls research staff, particularly the stormwater research group, in this question of the return on investment. So I came from, my background was where my dad was a banker and a dairy farmer, so I thought I was doing the same thing. I started in business, it's never left me. I'm probably the only administrator that's a International Honor Society of Economics. So we've driven this Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule, as far as we keep pushing on it constantly. So we appreciate the input and the feedback that we've got from you, Mark, very much so. But I also want the council members and the others to know that we are pursuing this with that group to understand, like, one is what is the, you know, where is that diminishing return on different practices to incorporate into our future, because rules exist throughout the entire state, right? We're not, you know, it's not just, you know, Forest Lake, it's not everywhere else. So, you know, how do you take that on? So there is interest. They're reaching out to some of the other bigger watershed districts to see about pooling some resources to help evaluate this in more detail, to have that understanding, to help understand where are we getting that return. The other is that, you know, we also know that, you know, one thing that's been driving both the shoreline and these kind of activities is that, so being a person of science and having done some work in experimental coring, I'm very familiar with the value of doing core sampling work. So we've been working with the St. Clair Watershed Research Station for some number of years, and that's researchers from here, Edmonton, Washington State, that are involved with the analysis. And one of the things in that 2022 study for Forest Lake was that over the last 20 to 30 years, we've been seeing a return back to a higher sedimentation rate. And so that is an increase both of accumulating, meaning the lake is not as deep, of course, you know, the lakes will eventually die, fill in, and so we're trying to extend the life through that process. But also then it brings in nutrients and that, you know, feeds that, so, and having addressed so much of external load and the street sweeping one, you know, that was a great partnership. I mean, it was very early on, so there had been some other research I had been involved with previously, and so I was very pleased that the city was willing to partner on that. We did all the legwork of the analysis, and then I spent about 3 years convincing Bowser that they should fund these street sweepers because it was so beneficial, and much to my surprise, they did. But it turns out to be one of the most cost-effective things that we can do, not only in Forest Lake, but it turns out now the rest of the metro. Because for many years, everybody was telling me, well, we can't do anything under $2,000 a pound. They were doing all these really expensive projects. Well, here, now many municipalities are adopting enhanced street sweeping, just like Forest Lake. And so they were, it was great to have that partnership and demonstrate be a leader in the community in that respect. And so, and that, you know, hopefully will continue to be a partnership on that, and I've been advocating to the state that they continue to fund replacements and the expansion of that program statewide, because any place that there's an MS4, you think about all the MS4 infrastructure there is that goes with it, that when you total it all up, you know, the savings from the maintenance side makes the sweeping something close to a net sum zero activity. You're paying for it either through the sweeping or through the maintenance. Through the sweeping, you're also getting some additional water quality benefit. So, you know, trying to continue to promote that. So I do want to, you know, both let the board know and council members here that when we did look at that, you know, it was, we did weigh that concern and the factor into place, because of, if you've been on enough projects, you know, things don't always go as planned, as much as so. And the last thing we wanted, you know, as someone that was responsible for the permitting side, is to have some major rain event and all of a sudden a big plume out into Forest Lake, and people are going, well, why didn't you do that? Why didn't you do something or the other? So, but I'm glad we're able to compromise or come to an agreement really on the most important areas of around Forest Lake, and encourage those that adoption. So
The watershed was founded because of not controlling best management practices in the early part of the building of Walmart. And that water just, and all that sediment came right through which was a ditch at the time. The Sunrise River had been ditched back in the probably 30s or 40s for farming. And so it was just a straight shot down to Comfort Lake. And overnight, this is what got me interested in water and what can you do about it. I'd served on planning commissions in the town board, so I had some government experience. And there's got to be a way to stop that. That's really what I thought at the beginning, but that happened overnight. I mean, honestly, we were 12 feet clear water, you know, just, you could see your toes, you know, at 10, 12 feet. And it was just unbelievable how that changed, because now you have these particles floating in the water column all over. We had a family reunion that we used to have for about 10 years back in those days. And if people, it would come once a year on the 4th of July. And it was bad enough that they noticed it. What's wrong with your lake? What is this stuff? So these protections are very important. They're a pain in the butt, you know, honestly, but they're necessary. And we are going to always look at projects from that perspective, because we don't want Forest Lake to be damaged. We don't want any of our river systems or our lakes damaged. So that's always going to be what we bring to the table, is that protection, that understanding of how things that we think aren't going to happen really can be very destructive. So I think we're in agreement here, maybe that wasn't the right, way to get the money for you, but again, if we have it up front, we can go through all those scenarios. And come to, an understanding. So, I have to withdraw that idea, obviously, because our attorney says no. That's for a different purpose, but in the same area, but we'll continue to find ways that we can. Steve brought up the point, I mentioned that, getting to us early on, the value of that is what he talked about, is that we can look for grants and we can put those in place before the project starts. We have to do that. And that's another way to help you out with big projects. We want to be your partner. Okay. All right, very good.
Steve and Chris both have their hands raised.
Okay, who was first? Chris? Chris, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Madam President. I was actually second, so I'll let Steve go first.
Okay,
No,
all right.
I already spoke, Chris, so why don't you go ahead?
All right, thank you. Just to kind of go back to the way that the city had kind of framed the question, the comparison to gravel roads that exist that lack any sort of buffer. The question is for maybe our engineer, or anyone that has any helpful information, but are there safeguards in place that limit gravel roads from existing in areas where close to wetlands, adjacent to water bodies, where that just wouldn't be allowed? Or how does a watershed look at that from an engineering standpoint?
Paved roads better than gravel, basically, is the question.
Well, maybe why.
Go ahead, Mike.
I was going to just, well, two things. One, I just wanted to thank Mark again for bringing this to our attention and scaling it back from the 42 down to 12. But the other is that we've had these discussions in the past about, and you last time we were in here, you talked about the ag field next to a water body, and we can't seem to touch it, right? So, but it doesn't mean that we don't want to lead by example, where we feel like it's the right thing to do for our local resource. And so, yeah, the only, I'll let you respond from the engineering side, but it's just that is the potential for something, okay, you've got to strip, maybe it's on that narrow area along Second Lake, where there's the water's right there, and some equipment breaks down after you've got it all turned up, and then you get a 3, 4, 6 inch rainfall, and then you get that. So it's those scenarios are maybe extreme to some degrees, but we're also seeing that those are now annual. In fact, we know that in the last 20 some years, we're seeing at least a 10-inch rainfall occur somewhere in Minnesota. And it's the principal reason our insurance rates have gone from being in the bottom. And you can talk to the insurance office here in Minnesota, from the bottom 5 to now we're in the top 5. And just recently over the winter, I was talking to somebody that works for one of the companies that was indicating that, like Florida, Texas, and California, they're considering pulling out of Minnesota because of the extreme weather conditions that we're experiencing here from these summer thunderstorms. So they have actuaries, they have, they do statistical probabilities, so they understand that. So that's starting to get my attention too from the water resource side. And we know that from the Atlas 14, it does not include the highest rainfall years that we had on record, that still is 25% higher precipitation rate than we've had in previously. So, but go ahead.
Yeah, I think the other thing I can add, Manager Loth, is that for this permitting process, we are just trying to reduce the load from the construction of that doesn't exist on the current road runoff. So it would be a different discussion, I guess, if they were trying to turn this into a gravel road, which I know is not what is happening, but the rules are in place to prevent any erosion during construction. And we believe that during this construction, though it is not the highest risk of many projects that we do, there's potential for that runoff to reach these kind of these high priority areas without any sort of natural or adjacent treatment, and that's why we want these temporary practices in place, just in case we have delays or, like Mike said, any of those kind of conditions. So I'm not sure that exactly answers your question, but that's kind of the motivation for providing this temporary erosion control.
Thanks. Thank you. I completely understand that. I'm looking at an existing gravel road that's been gravel forever. You know, are there efforts on anyone's behalf, whether it's the watershed, city, county, Department of Public Works, that where in another area where a gravel road exists, are there areas where gravel roads exist where that could be comparable to what we're looking at here in a temporary fashion? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Or am I not making sense?
Maybe I could jump in a little bit. I think I get what you're coming from, Manager Loth. You know, I would say the answer is no. We're not actively looking at those areas. I'd say, you know, in general, so there's definitely sediment coming off of gravel roads. Even though it's compacted, there's still sediment coming off of those. They come through and grade them and stir everything up. And if you get a big rain event during that, you're definitely getting runoff off of those. One of the things that often mitigates that is gravel roads are often in very rural areas, and they have, you know, wide swales and shoulders that kind of filter the runoff before it gets anywhere. And so that somewhat offsets that. You know, in this case, the areas where Ann and the district are requesting this erosion control, you know, we're basically right up against these wetlands with no natural filter or swales to, you know, capture that sediment. So that's really what we're looking at here. I think I don't know if there's a lot of it in the district, but you know, there could be instances where there's gravel roads right up next to a high quality wetland or lake where there is some impact going. But to answer your question, that's not something we've been actively looking at.
Madam President, may I comment?
Let's
Sure.
let Manager Loth finish. Did you have anything else, Manager Loth?
No, that satisfies my curiosity. Thanks, Greg.
Oh, okay, and then Steve was next with his hands up. I will get to you.
Okay.
Go ahead, Manager Smalls. You had
Well,
your
I just
hand up?
wanted to make listening to Manager Loth brings back a conversation we had last summer. Manager Loth is on the North Shore Circle, which was redone last summer. And of course, I'm on the schedule this year because I'm down about 6 blocks from where he lives. So Hayward Avenue is going to get it this year. And I asked him, what was it? How did you feel about that whole project? How did it go? And well, the comment he made was it went well, we thought, especially when it was all finished. But during the construction time, it was dirty all the time, dusty. It was just a mess. And I think that further illustrates the fact that there is a lot of particles that are loose there and so forth. If you do have a heavy rain, some of that's going to definitely wash into the lake if it's nearby. So the old saying is an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, and that is certainly true when it comes to water quality and trying to undo past water quality issues that we have. We found out about that. We spent $6 million undoing past practices. So it is quite expensive. And even though we have grants, the money comes from somewhere and from some taxpayer, hopefully not just locally, but it does come from state taxpayers. So just wanted to point that out also based upon his comments from last summer's experience.
All right, thank you. Now it's your turn.
Madam President, just I thought, given the conversation, it would behoove us to just talk about the existing gravel road problem. Many gravel roads go right through the middle of a swamp, through the wetlands. They were built 100 years ago for agricultural purposes, and back then you just piled some dirt. Actually, a lot of times they scoop it from the sides and put it in the middle. That's how they built these roads down a lot of section lines and that kind of thing. There is no real solution there. Nobody builds silt fences or permanent or anything like that. But I will say, as your engineer mentioned, silt does come off of these gravel roads, you know, we lose gravel to the swamp every year. One way to prevent that is to pave them. However, one thing prohibiting us from paving them is the fiscal, obviously, cost of paving, but to make matters worse, the rules that are in place to mitigate stormwater, especially volume in these cases, makes it much more cost prohibitive. So the rules that are in place prohibit us, make it more prohibitive to get rid of gravel roads. Does that make any sense? So the rules we have in place that try to mitigate some of the volume impacts of impervious surfaces also make it more prohibitive for us to pave gravel roads. So as we think about our rules, especially on linear projects, I think we should always keep that in mind, that if we can keep those projects affordable, it's more likely that we can pull the trigger on those and get those gravel roads paved. Believe me, our public works director wants nothing to do with gravel roads. And he would love to start paving more of them.
But we're really not talking about that here.
Sure.
We're talking about a paved road.
Yep.
Right?
Much different.
And
scenario,
it's
yes.
mixed in with the gravel.
Yep.
And so you've got not pristine gravel. You've got gravel that's been mixed in with that overlay. And so, as you mentioned before, it's got all kinds of oil in it. You know, and so that makes it dangerous. If we have a big rain and you're in the process of doing a patch in the road, you know, anything can happen.
Sure.
So, yes.
Madam President, managers. Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, I just wanted to just kind of address that comment. I think that's a reasonable point, that, you know, converting a rural section gravel road to a urban section definitely triggers our rules. And I think this ties back to Manager Schmaltz's comments and several other comments about, you know, if we know about these areas a couple years in advance, you know, we can work together to, you know, both get that paved, so Public Works doesn't have to deal with a gravel road, but also figure out how to get stormwater BMPs incorporated along that corridor to actually improve the situation. So I think that's really what we're looking for. That's what we've been asking for many years. And it sounds like, you know, hopefully this meeting and kind of the new folks that have joined the city, we can kind of take some steps forward here to really make that happen and work together kind of in advance of these projects, and not, you know, kind of debating the nuances of erosion control, you know, a few weeks before the permit's ready to go and the contractor's ready to go. So, you know, that's what I'm really looking forward to, is some good collaboration on these future projects. And if the city wants to identify roads that they want to see paved, let's do that now and figure out how we can make that happen and get stormwater implemented.
Great.
It's a good way to end
Thanks,
the
Greg.
discussion. Thank you, Greg. Okay, can you put the motion back on the board, please? This is the recommended motion, so I'll ask the board. What do you want to do?
I think the motion's is already up and made, so we just need to take a vote, I guess, unless there's additional discussion.
We haven't made the motion yet.
I thought somebody made the motion when we started.
Because we had.
So I'll make the motion. I'll move that to approve permit application number 25-004 with conditions stated in the May 19th, 2025 engineer report.
Is there a second? I will second the motion. Further discussion? Okay, roll call, please.
Manager Lowe,
Aye.
Manager Schmaltz,
Aye.
Manager Baki,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
President Anderson.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the compromises that you made, and we'll talk about this discussion
Sounds like a future discussion.
later. Absolutely.
Can I just make, Madam?
Yes.
Just make a few comments. I just, I know early on, when this watershed was formed, there was better communication. I think that got lost with the previous city administrator. And so we're gonna make all efforts to re-engage ahead of time and be more of a partner with
Yes.
you. And are really interested in going through that review process of the rules and regulations.
Wonderful. All right, very good. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate it very much.
Thanks, Mark.
It was a nice
Thanks, Mike.
discussion. It's nice to see you again.
Yeah, I'm gonna go this way.
Kevin, are you staying?
I am gonna stay.
All right.
Enjoy the rest of this.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Yep, sorry, pulling it up.
Oh, good.
Stop my screen really quickly.
Do you have a clicker for me to?
Mike, oh, right there.
The attorney
Is
said.
it all on, ready to go?
No, it's good.
I got it.
Oh, yeah, okay, right.
Chuck. He's right there. Chuck.
Thank you.
He was my engineer. Okay, the next item up is the ad that we put, we're gonna be talking about the new salary process, schedule, so it's all yours, Mark.
All right, Madam,
Just a second.
Okay.
Sorry.
no, okay.
He can do his intro.
Oh, yeah.
Madam President, managers, thank you so much for having me here. It's great to meet you in person. I've talked with President Anderson and Manager Schmaltz quite a bit over the last couple months. So I just want to kind of go through this a little bit, explain a little bit about our background, what we're trying to do with this, what the results were, and then kind of what we designed here. I'd rather this be a little bit more informal, so please don't feel like you need to wait till the end. If you have any questions, just say, hey, hold on one second, can you talk about that a little bit more, and we'll go through it in as much depth as you need. So DDA's been doing this for a long time, over 25 years. But a lot of that time was spent on the financial side of things. And then about 9-10 years ago, our clients asked us for help with HR related matters, and my partner, Dr. Tessa Melvin, started our class and comp group. I actually joined, it'll be 5 years this November. Before that, I was with Arthur J. Gallagher, where the system you kind of had before, with them for about 6.5 years, helping to lead their public sector compensation group. Before that, with the University of Minnesota and the Metropolitan Council. So my nearly 30 years doing this, over half of it's within the public sector specifically. So what are we trying to do here? The goal is to give you a class and comp system that makes sense, one that is internally equitable, meaning when we line things up within the watershed district, that hierarchy makes sense, and externally competitive, meaning when you look at your peers, when you look at those with whom you compete for talent, you're paying people at a competitive rate. Not here to do staffing, not here to do an org study, not here to cut costs or cut anyone's pay. No one will lose money within this. But it's not that everyone's gaining money, or everyone will do better. Some people will do better than others based on what the market information shows. So we had 19 different organizations that we tried to gather information from. Some of it was who's near you. Some of it's, similar size watershed districts. Some of it's, just kind of similar structure organizations. And we wanted to see who do you lose people to and where do you recruit people from. So this is the list of different places we got stuff from. You can see it's pretty much all watershed districts, although some are just conservation districts like Washington Conservation District with Jay over there. But we got a lot of information. We didn't get everything from every single one, but 75% of them we got data from. And when we got this information, we went through it very closely with Mike, with Ellen, to make sure that the matches that we pulled were accurate. We needed at least 4 data points for every job. If there weren't 4 data points for a job, there's not enough there to draw conclusions. So we want to make sure that there's enough there to say, yeah, there's enough here to make a decision that, yeah, this is the market information for this. And if you see positive number, means you're above market, negative means you're below. If you're within 5%, you're really close.
If you're within, over 10%, then there's a possible misalignment with the market. But plus or minus 10% is not something I came up with. It's actually the Department of Labor standard. And what that says is if you're 9% below or 8% above, that would be market competitive. Well, how's that? Plus or minus 10%, according to the Department of Labor, it encompasses most people who are fully competent in their jobs and doing it, and they're good with it, but they're paid at different rates for a lot of reasons, some of which are listed here. Could be past performance, could be, higher skill level, could be, some certifications, but plus or minus 10% is market. And then something to think about, which is that employees are gonna be paid at different kind of parts of the salary range, depending on where they are in their site and their kind of employee life cycle. If you're early in your career, generally, you're gonna be paid towards the bottom of the structure. You move up, and then around your middle part of your career, you're kind of being around the middle, and then more experienced employees often are paid towards the top of the range, not all the time, it's not a guarantee, but just as a general rule, that's appropriate. So you guys were a little bit below market, about 2.2% below market on the minimums, about 3.3% on the maximums. And the structure that we're proposing is going to move you to about 2% above on the minimums and about 3% on the maximums, 3.2. President Anderson and Manager Schmaltz have seen a lot of this. For the rest of the board, what do you guys think of this? Does this kind of align with where you would like to see the watershed district be?
I have questions for managers, so feel free to answer. You don't need my permission to speak.
I think it's valuable that we're competitive and that we don't lose people over a 3 or 4% gain and lose that institutional knowledge that we have from them. So I think, bumping up a little bit is an appropriate thing to do if we can warrant that.
I also agree. I think it's important to be competitive, and I've been involved very, 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 very short period of time, but have seen a fair amount of turnover. It's concerning at some points, and I can see the impact it has on an organization that is very focused, and it can be often distracting to have to deal with that. And so if a small increase to what our benchmark salaries are can help us compete with other job opportunities candidates might have, I think that's well worth the investment.
Yes, I also agree with the other managers on this. However, I guess I need to understand a little bit more. This is my second time looking at this and trying to understand that we are comparing to other neighboring watershed districts and their salary schedules. Is that correct?
Madam President, Manager Baki, yes, that is correct. So what we did was we gathered information from these other watershed districts or soil and water districts or conservation districts, and we averaged everything. We got all 2025 information, so this is all from this year, and said, okay, when we look at this on the whole, where are things coming out? Both those minimums and maximums. And again, I want to emphasize, you weren't in a bad spot before. 2.2 below and 3.3 below is not bad. That's still market competitive, but it's obviously a better story to tell if you're 2% below versus 2% above versus 2% below. Still both market competitive, but it's just better.
I guess my question is then why not be at the benchmark, at the market level rather than above? I mean, what's the argument for that?
What I've been telling my clients is if you're able to do it to have a little bit of wiggle room to be above, that would be a little bit better because the market is moving so quickly in some cases that if you have that, again, I'm not suggesting you're going to be 10% above or anything like that, but if you're 2 to 3% above, if the market moves a little bit more quickly, that's not going to put you below.
And how quickly does the market move?
It's an excellent question. It has been moving extremely quickly. So for a lot of years, I was telling my clients, you don't have to do a salary study every year. You can do it every 2, 3, 4, 5 years, 2, 3, 4 years, and you'll be fine. Now, you're almost needing to do it every year or two because things are moving and the structures are changing so quickly. We're expecting things to start slowing down in 2026. The structure movements in the past have been 3.5%. We're now targeting things more like 2.5%, maybe up to 3%. But normally 0.5% to 1% lower than what it had been in previous years.
Is this also tied in with inflation as well? Is that a consideration?
To a certain extent it is. I mean, when I said the structure movement, and to give you a little bit of wiggle room, it's okay if things move more quickly, you have that space. But this is not necessarily inflation related, it's cost of labor related. Sorry,
Madam President, Manager Baki, also to address Manager Lowe's comment about turnover. So for actual district data, so we did our study in 2021 with Gallagher. So that was at market at the time, so for the ranges. And then they would annually provide me with a recommended increase. And typically it would be about they'd say, well, where the market is, we would recommend 3.5, or else it was 3.5, 4%. It was sometimes it was always like they give us about a 0.5 point range to make a decision from. Annually, I picked the higher number out of concern of market movement, and that still added us at 2.2 and 3.3 below after 4 years. So not huge, but at the same time, we know that there are, I'd say most of the opportunities that other staff have left for is because the other metro districts have been able to outpay the Cumberland Lake Forest Lake. So.
Well, their positions are different too. They're not doing
Well,
exactly the same things they did here. So.
There's also other factors, but they're depending on where they reside, right? So some of them took a position where the office was closer, in commuting distance, et cetera.
President, can I make a comment, President Anderson?
Well, are you finished, Mike?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Mike's comments, I think, pertain to, just so they're not confusing here. His comments are pertaining to moving the range based upon inflation, not 3.5% for increases for people. So the range moves with the inflationary activity that we have. And once the range moves, then when you're done with your years of performance, you go back and review based upon how you performed against your objectives. Then you may get a 1 or a 3 or a 7% increase, depending how you performed and where you are in the range. So I just want to make that point. It's pretty easy to assume maybe that comment was pertaining to what the people are going to get. So you want to confirm that just so we're clear on that, if we could?
Yes, Madam President, that's correct, Mr. Schmaltz. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Madam President, managers, just to be clear, if Mike calls me up later this year and says, hey, what are you seeing for structure movements? I'll just tell him. I mean, you'll still be getting that. No, I'm not going to charge you for that. Just like, hey, you seeing 2.5, 3? Yeah, about there. Which is what we're saying right now.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. So wanted to be very clear, employees are paid competitively against the market. You putting aside the structure, the actual pay is competitive. Now, one of the things we were doing differently is we evaluated the jobs using the JET system. Every single public sector agency in the state of Minnesota, other than the University of Minnesota, which somehow got exempted, has to use a job evaluation system to comply with pay equity. The JET system that we're putting in place for you guys was actually designed for the public sector. So it works really, really well. And what a job evaluation system does is just say, hey, how do you define this hierarchy? How do you use it to determine pay? That's really what its core function is. And the JET system has 7 different factors. I'm going to kind of go through them, but it is a pretty comprehensive way of approaching things. It does look at supervision. It does look at hazards. And I want to be very clear on this. This is about the job, not the person. You take the people out of it completely. How long someone's been doing the job does not matter. How well they're doing the job does not matter. It is the job itself, not the person. So these are the 7 criteria within JET. And President Anderson, oh, sorry, Steve, you have your hand up?
That's still up.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'll remove that.
Oh, it's all good. But President Anderson and Manager Schmaltz have seen a lot of the details on this. And so the details behind it are for qualifications, it's what is the minimum education and experience necessary to do the job, not what the employee personally has. So Mike might have a PhD and 25 years of experience, which is great, lets him do his job effectively. But if he were to leave, would you be looking for a minimum of 25 years and a PhD or bachelor's in 5? It's below this threshold, you ain't getting this job. Decision-making takes into account a number of different pieces. One is, what are the decisions inherent in the job? And if something breaks, what happens to the watershed district? But it also looks at it from supervision. It also says, if you're in a core function, kind of what's the impact on the organization? Problem solving is how technical is the job to do, and similar to decision making, if something breaks, what happens? Relationships are who you're talking to and what are the nature of those communications. Are you only having discussions within your team, or are you standing up in front of a state agency and making complex discussions? Physical effort, how much you got to lift and how often you got to lift it. Mental effort, how mentally focused do you need to be in your job? And then hazards and environment, what are you exposed to in your job? There's a little bit of a difference being in the office versus being out in the field and kind of wading through the water and cold weather and bugs and being out on the road and things. So that's how JET evaluates everything. Any questions around that? Does that kind of seem like a good way of approaching it? Steve, you don't get to answer. You've seen a lot of the stuff already.
Give the details on the acronym.
The job evaluation tool.
Yeah.
So that's what it stands for. It stands for the job evaluation tool.
It meant President,
Yes.
the Gallagher system did not have this.
Businesses do though. So businesses have similar things like this, is that you're evaluating the job and not the individual and what qualifications and decision making, all these same things.
Somewhat, yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, just as a quick aside, the tool that Gallagher uses, the decision band method, created in 1961 for the diamond mines of South Africa. It's the absolute truth. And I can say that because I actually had the book that it was based, that was coming from, that T.T. Patterson wrote for it. Okay, so if there's no questions on that, when we put this together, we take the market information, we take the job, the points and how we evaluate it, and we use it to put together a salary range to just say, hey, what's the minimum, what's the maximum that you want to pay for this based on where the market is. And then the salary range width means how far is that from that minimum to the maximum? And that can vary a lot. Within the state of Minnesota, I've done it as little as like 15 or 18% and as high as 70%. Outside of Minnesota, there was a place in Florida that had 120% range width, meaning went from 50,000 to 120,000. No right or wrong, just a different organizational philosophy. So we get the information, we use to create the structure. Just so you know, it's not one job per grade. There's usually going to be a couple jobs in each grade, although some may only have one. But you could have jobs doing vastly different things in the same grade. What that means is, even though the work being performed is different, when we evaluate it using all those factors, it's coming out kind of around the same. So 5 grades, anywhere from 10 to 25% apart from each other. You don't want to have anything less than like 5% because then there's too much overlap from one grade to the next. 25% really is pretty wide, but that's really just kind of at the very, very top. Range width is 53%. And when we looked at what your peers are for that, it was really competitive. And that's what the structure looks like. And again, you have your performance management system. So, you just kind of progress through there based on, how high of a performance rating you get. And that's where all the grades are. As you can see, there's a couple in grade 4, a couple in grade 3, a couple in grade 2. Any questions on any of that? Okay, well, we did look at a number of different options. We did talk about doing some other structures. It was determined that the watershed district was going to stay with the open structure, meaning, you know, there's no steps, it's just you progress through based on your performance. There wasn't any major adjustments that were needed from this, again, because you weren't far off the market. And, you know, we did a little bit of tweak of the structures, but, you know, people were paid competitively already. So that's all I got. What questions can I address for everyone?
President
Floor is open.
Anderson.
Yes, go ahead, Manager Baki.
So I guess I'm a little perplexed that when we look at JET, we're evaluating the job and not the employee. However, we are doing a performance review, and what is that based on then? Do we have criteria for that you're suggesting?
For the performance-based piece of it?
Yeah.
I actually don't deal with the performance side of things. That's handled in-house. What I'm trying to do with JET and with the structure itself is set those structures appropriately. How someone moves through that salary range, that's an internal piece in terms of the performance rating and how people achieve their SMART goals. Is that correct, Mike?
Yes, the other thing is that, so, with the step, like, state, federal, school district, et cetera.
Counties and cities a lot too.
Right, everybody knows where they're at in any one place, right? It's just a matter of time. The advantage, and that was discussed with the managers is of the open, is that we have given our adaptive management and then the scale. It really allows for staff to be able to flex, if you will, and move into new opportunities that exist when there is turnover and or changes in the workload that the district is offering. So then it's a matter of, you know, within that range for any one grade, there's that natural bell curve, and it's then trying to move people, I guess, probably to be competitive ahead of somewhat the time frame. If you were to say a 30-year career, the bell is so 15, you're going to be halfway through the range. But given that a lot of the staff are you know, high performing from that standpoint, our typical scenario right now is that they would be ahead of that point in time, if you will. And that also just allows for us to move, if you will, to be competitive, because I mean, I continue to get job postings, and a concern that I have is, given the continued growth in the market, because watershed districts are growing, there's more people, there's more demand on resources, and there's subsequently more demand for people with this level of expertise. So from that standpoint, then, you know, the SMART goal has been a piece that we've incorporated, but it's not the entirety of the decision made for. I mean, they functionally still need to perform the work that is assigned to them, and that's then graded, if you will, through the work plan. So, and also through some performance metrics that I just keep track of independently from that side of it. So, those different factors then come into consultation with Ellen, our HR consultant, and then typically I'd also do a check-in with the salary consultant on recommendations, and then make sure it aligns with what we have within the budget.
Manager Baki, does that answer your question, sir?
Yeah, that's very helpful. And Mike knows I'm a real believer in SMART goals. And I guess my question back to Mike then is, when the SMART goals are established, is that in collaboration with the employee?
Oh, absolutely, yes. In fact, I would say It's been my history prior to doing the SMART goals, we had something similar. I had staff from, and I will give credit to my first boss 30-some years ago, whatever it was, that did something similar, was to set your goals for your next typically 6-month period. And then so, but staff had, I would have them have work goals. I wanted a minimum of 5, and then also 3 to 5 professional work goals. So from the standpoint that if they had a goal professionally outside of the actual work that they're doing, say they wanted to get a certification or something else, then, or sometimes it was more just a personal goal, but they wanted to make sure that they had the time for it or whatever. Then it was helpful for me to know that, to help them meet that professional or personal goal that they had. So that's been the strategy or the philosophy that's been with the district. Well, I guess since I've been here, but I was there was no other than the administrator here when I first started. So but so for the duration of the district's time is to have some structure like that. We didn't call it a SMART goal initially, but it was similarly structured. So that was, so, but at the end of the day, it's still, there's that component of the core work, and all that work is laid out within, I mean, you are familiar with the work plan. It's assigned by position and then by month and number of hours and task. So staff know where they need to be and what they need to be working on. And that's also just from a professional standpoint of, they don't need me looking over their shoulder at any one time, telling them what they need to do at each and every week. They can see that through the structure that's been built over time. And then there's just the expectation that they will, meet that. But of course, we have a regular all staff meetings on Monday to, make sure, whatever field work, monitoring, et cetera, based on the weather is accomplished, and people are regularly jumping in and working on that. And then there's a senior staff meeting on Thursday where we will address any other things that are more of a higher level in conversation for the full staff. But so we know where there's anytime that there's and of course, by maintaining some level of performance metrics outside of that, I'm always interested in, and right now I have probably for the last 5 to 6 weeks, I've been asking staff to start working on a workload analysis so they can, look at the things that are taking them the longest. And it's not a criticism, but rather just simply from a process standpoint, what are the things that are, because you could say that, okay, I'm working on, well, we'll pick on permitting here, that for some number of 4 hours on a day. But what is comprised within that 4 hours on a repetitive basis? And then is there anything in there, looking at breaking it up into pieces? And so one of the things that's occurred over the last year or so was made some changes, and then we went from roughly 2.5 FTE in permitting down to 1.8. So by identifying some weak points within the system and buying some technology, the tablets in particular, to help achieve more outcome, better results, better communication with the contractors and the builders, much more responsive from that standpoint. So so there's always a challenge in front of everybody, and it's a balance of pushing them, but not pushing them too hard.
We're gonna have to wrap this discussion pretty quickly if we're gonna get through the rest of the agenda. So are there any particular questions that anyone on the board wants to explore further?
Well,
If it's-
President Anderson,
Sure.
if I could just comment on Mike's explanation, it sounds like we're treating our employees as professionals.
Always. Always.
They can speak for themselves.
Any other comments or questions on this topic? Okay, thank you, Mark, very
Thank you
much.
so much.
Very nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Yes. Thanks for your hard work and
We just
Appreciate that.
to get it on to the jacket.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you so much.
Okay, let's move on to impact of federal funding cuts. 6B.
President Andrew. So I just wanted the board to be aware of this and really kind of the, the community as well, but when we drafted this, it was initially, so we have benefited for the last a couple different years now from an individual that gets hired by the NPCA through a AmeriCorps program. And so right now, Julie Gabbro has been that person on a 1-year contract, no cost to local taxpayers here, paid again through this other program. They receive some other benefits. They're potentially offset some by doing this. Their financial compensation is quite low in lieu of providing benefits for both healthcare and tuition, loan remediation, I guess, if you will. But that's been cut. And very unfortunately for this individual, will not receive those benefits through the program. So as dedicated whatever 8 months or so of her time that will have just received that low salary compensation. And so initially that was that person, and then the district learned about it a week after the program actually had been formally cut. But the state of Minnesota NPCA had confirmed, responded quickly and communicated out that they were funding it until the end of June, the fiscal year. And now, just within the last couple of days, it's my understanding that that state has that in the budget and will carry that person through the middle of August. So, which will be the original length of time through that program. So, but we will not be eligible to receive workers through that program in the future. And kind of again, when you look at the fact that district staff, that's really 8 to 10% of our staff capacity has been through somebody that's been outside from working here seamlessly, but funded through an outside entity and a work program. It's been a great partnership. There were some other impacts that have been also resolved through the funding through one of our other grants, but that's I guess has also been addressed. But the other piece that we will likely see impacts on, maybe not directly, but it'll come probably pretty shortly, is the significant reduction through the USDA environmental, the EQIP program, and other things that soil and water conservation districts, especially Chisago County, has really relied on those funds quite heavily. They've been really excelled at getting funding through that program. And then as a result, they've not had the need or really interest, because if they were trying to utilize the other federal resources, they were not in the pool, so to speak, for the lower St. Croix monies very often. So but now we would expect in the future that will change, and we'll see more I guess competition, if not there, but more demand, if you will, for those limited funds that we do have. So it'll have a future impact. It just won't be so direct.
Okay. And there's still battles in court that could change, or Congress that could change this too.
Right, but most needs we're not gonna cover. I mean, most of the employees around the country that were in the America program. Just
Yeah, no, I'm not
Yeah.
talking specifically about that.
Right.
I'm talking about this disruption in these program funds. Okay. Any other questions on that topic? There's a link on the page on the agenda online that you can go to for more data, so that's helpful at the end of that page. Old business, let's start that. 7A, strategic plan formatting and distribution.
Madam President, managers, so, board at the end of, April concluded the last meeting, for the strategic plan and, through the, attached, document there for the, spreadsheet. The different components of that, and so it's I guess really a board discussion at this point as to how you want to proceed.
Nicole put together the website. I don't know if people want to just take a quick glance at that.
Well, explain that to us.
So this is not, like, you cannot find this on the website yet if you're just like looking on the website, but Pinnacle put together the strategic plan, so they, this is the top of the webpage. Just kind of goes over our mission, value, our vision, mission and values, kind of Yanni's, snapshot of what they are. Then the vision and mission, and then of course the values, and that was the design that was chosen. So, I don't know if this is, I think this can undergo changes, and so, Adam just had shared this to me and let me know that I can share it with you all tonight.
Okay, so is this something that we can access?
If you go,
Board
I will
members?
send, I will send this direct link to you.
Okay,
I can send it to all of you and then,
Yes.
You can look at it on your own.
okay, I think that's wise, and if we have comments, we can schedule that review at the next meeting. Gives us time, and, is Emily going to be at the next meeting?
Yes,
Okay.
regular meeting, yes.
Yeah, so she can walk us through this process too for the next steps. Is that okay with everybody? Okay,
Yes, President Anderson?
yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just looking at what we received in the board packet is very different than what we're seeing on the screen. So, I just, yeah, we need to have further discussion would be appreciated.
Okay. I think rather than, do this motion, I think we should table this until Emily is available. So at the next meeting. And it gives us more time to look, especially if we're gonna have access to that new, I don't know, what is it, a website,
Yeah.
maybe? Okay. All right, very good. Is everybody in agreement? We'll table this topic. Gives us time
Yes.
to look at everything. Thank you.
Yeah, that's fine.
Do we have to vote on that?
No, without objection, we'll table this. Chuck's gonna correct me if I'm wrong. Can I just do that as the chair, or do we need a vote?
No motion is needed, Madam Chair.
Thank you, thank you. All right, 7B. Lake impairment delisting requests.
Then president managers, they have the memo, the staff's been working on. Dr. Wilkerson is here also to help guide any discussion that the board may have. We laid out, some recommendations. And, so while we're not being overly prescriptive, I think we just identified it as either very high probability, medium, low. We can, Dr. Wilkerson can go through those rationales.
Yeah, I think understanding those rationales is important, because first inclination is only do the one that says very, very highly, acceptable.
Certainly.
You know, but go ahead, tell us what you're thinking.
Yeah, Madam President and managers, these recommendations or probability ranges came from a discussion that that we've had internally, reviewing the 2024 progress report and then 2024 monitoring report. And then also we had several discussions, Emily and myself, with the MPCA staff, both technical and administrative staff, that would be reviewing these requests for their recommendation and inclusion in the delisting from the impaired waters list. How it works is essentially we submit these forms for review by the MPCA, and then they submit their findings from the review and then final delisting recommendations to the EPA. And so that's why this takes like a very extended period of time. In our first conversations with the MPCA staff and our administrative staff that represents the watershed district is very new. So we thought that we had more time to provide a little bit of data, have them have an extended review. That doesn't seem to be the case. So we have to submit this request now. But we were able to talk to their technical staff that will do the reviews ultimately, and we reviewed with them the progress reports, which really outline how much progress we've made towards these delisting requirements. There are two requirements. The first is that we're meeting state standards for at least 2 years of the most recent 10 years, and that we're seeing a trend over the most recent 10 years. Excuse me. And we're reviewing all of our lakes that are still on the impaired waters list: Comfort Lake, Little Comfort Lake, School, Moody, Shields. We went through all of those with them in their preliminary recommendations, though they can't give us a definitive yes or no now because they haven't gotten the formal request, but these were the bins of probabilities that they gave us. And I could talk a little bit about why they made those recommendations. Essentially, Comfort Lake has been meeting water quality goals for several years now, and shows an improving trend over the last 10 years without, it can either be an improving trend over the past 10 years or a significant, like an alum treatment and a significant intervention. And they'll count that also. It doesn't have to be 10 years. So Comfort Lake has been showing that improving trend over the 10 years, and then also has been meeting that priority one, category 1, which is the impairments without exceedances for several years now. And not to quote them, but they said it's a no-brainer.
Well, especially during the drought years.
Yes.
Comfort was down to 19.
Yes.
Almost like Keewatin.
Yes, exactly,
Possible.
exactly. And it also fared well during this most recent
Oh, yeah.
2024.
Sure.
Which they also are taking into account. For the next two, Little Comfort and Shields, they had a medium to high priority. This kind of goes into there are several exceedances, but it's not, but it still meets their criteria in that two of the years in the past 10 years have been showing improvement. Have been meeting standards, just a few exceedances here or there.
I'm surprised at school, you know, how it's cleaned up with just a few really important projects.
Yes.
And it was like a mud lake before. It really was. A lot of that agricultural, of course, and livestock.
Right.
Coming down, you know. But anyway, so that's really encouraging.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. With Moody and Shields, these were the lower priority, and they also said that they'd like to see a couple more years just because a lot of the improvements that have been on both lakes kind of were coincident with those drought years. And then also we saw a little bit of a rebound during 2024, which we knew was a difficult water quality year across the district. So they wanted to see that lake response to those management practices a little bit longer to be more certain.
I think that makes
for
sense.
the removing from the impairment.
Yeah.
And as we said, we're continuing to do that monitoring to show any changes or responses to those management practices. So we'll be able to document that for them in the coming years. There's no reason for them to stay impaired and on the impaired list if they don't need to be. It's just they wanted to see some additional years after some of those discrete management practices, particularly the alum treatments, for a little bit longer period of time.
And Shields, did you get the Shields?
Shields and Moody were similarly, because of the alum treatments. Also Shields, we did see, some high concentrations coming in to the tributary during 2024 monitoring, which we are reevaluating this year to determine, if those are long-term, risks.
Yeah, I was just gonna bring that up. So we don't know yet what caused that dramatic spike.
Correct.
Okay. Well, that'll be interesting.
Yes.
It has to be a singular source, don't you think? I mean, it's not. Even with the heavy rains, is there much open ground that would bring sediment into Shields? Who knows, huh? Okay.
Well, I mean, that was an area that was built without prior to any rules, so there's no stormwater.
Okay.
Features, but what there are is, couple of wetlands, there's a pond at the bottom. But I think it was more just a low depressional area, it wasn't something that was from, because probably a decade ago, there was, we had those in 2014, very high rain, the spring runoff in particular. And some of the, I guess, highest runoff events that I've seen in the district, so at that time. But the thing is, after a few years, those wetlands they're literally completely full, so this is something I've been talking to staff about, is because there's areas like over by Aldi's, over that area, over another one opposite of the north side of Chestnut Creek, where different activity is if the wetlands are no longer functional. So they're completely full, and then what happens is they themselves become a source of nutrients.
Sure.
So there's probably the case there, or we could probably make the case that some wetland remediation should be conducted in those locations. Especially with the Shields Lake project that we did with the golf course, at least we have some stormwater feature capturing water from the upstream areas. The lower section still would be without any stormwater feature, but at the same time, but I'm just speculating that that's a very likely source of that high loading, is that because we had however old that development is which is probably 40, 50 years old or something, is the amount of time that sediment is, those wetlands have been impacted.
Yeah. Shallow Pond became a source for Comfort Lake because the culvert was inverted, and so it was acting as a dam, and that was not good. That went on for a few years, and then it was corrected. But anyway, I understand that kind of thing can happen, especially when you've got development going around close by, and people don't think about what is not there years in the past, because there's houses, so it's got to be there, right? All that infrastructure has to be there, but oftentimes it isn't. Well, are there any questions of the board on this topic? If not, I'm going to make a motion to direct staff to submit Comfort Lake for delisting assessment by the MPCA. Is there a second?
I will second that motion.
Thank you. And just keeping it in the discussion phase, my rationale, of course, is that it's a no-brainer, obviously, for the MPCA out of their own mouths. And I think, that one's truly ready to go. The other ones still have things that need to be done. And so we might be pushing that a little bit, and I want to take care of the ones that we know we're not going to be wasting time on, because we've got the data. And we'll keep working on those others. So that's my rationale. And any other comments or questions?
I have a question. we're not gonna learn very much about the process if we just submit Comfort Lake because it's a slam dunk and we know it's gonna pass. Is there any advantage to submitting like Little Comfort as well as School Lake? And learning from that process that might help us do a better job if we have to make tweaks to it? Or is it extremely expensive to submit those two time-wise? Once we do the work, it's going to be the same as the following year. Except we'll have additional data to fill in some of the gaps, hopefully. So I'm just thinking we should take an opportunity to learn more about how they're going to react to School Lake and how they're going to react to Little Comfort Lake, so we can learn from that, from those comments. Much like we did when we started working with grants, we talking to the people that were reviewing the grants, learning how they think, learning what they're looking for, et cetera, et cetera. It seems to me it could be time and money well spent.
Well, yeah, both of them. Mike's got his hand up, so I'm gonna let him talk here in a minute, but both of those were very clear on what they wanted. You know, the grant program is laid out in black and white on what they need and what needs to be submitted. Our advantage is that we have this data going back to the early years of the district. And so we have this incredible amount of data that we constantly, every year, are updating. And so that really is the home run for us. I mean, it really is the foundation of everything. But Mike, you had your hand up, so why don't you?
Yeah, Madam President, Manager Schmaltz and managers. So, right, so what is it? There's definitely a difference between the two processes here that we're talking about. On the grant side, you know, like, I guess we'll go to the street sweeper, for example. That was previously an item not funded by the state and not eligible for competitive clean water fund grants. But I continue to have conversations with Meet and, you know, suggest that be a piece that was to be included, and eventually it was. So we see the results there. The other, I guess the other piece to know about the decision as to whether to put forth those Little Comfort and School Lake is that they may get through the system and be delisted, and that's fine. It doesn't really change the water quality, right? It doesn't, but if it does, if those water bodies become delisted, then if there's any other future activity that is yet to be considered, and I would maybe suggest that if we were gonna do one of the two, I would propose we move forward with School Lake. Because for Little Comfort, we have this stretch between School Lake and Little Comfort where there's a unnatural, we don't fully understand what's going on, but there's a lot of sediment being picked up and discharged into Little Comfort. If it's delisted, then right now it's one more piece to argue with the agencies about in terms of the management as well as for funding, that, hey, the lake is delisted. Or excuse me, the lake is still impaired. But if it's delisted, they would say, well, it's meeting water quality goals, we don't really care anymore. But it still doesn't change the fact that the sediment is going into Little Comfort.
Exactly. And that's, but these went through the review process with MPCA, or the pre-review process.
Right, but they're just looking at the numbers. They're not looking at, you know, the inlet numbers. They're not looking at the numbers that the district staff has been collecting in terms of, I mean, that the ISCO and those sampling data sets are not included in that review. They're looking at the in-lake samples themselves. So we're looking at, our diagnostic work is looking at what's coming into those water bodies.
Right.
So again, you know, until if we knew that the Heath Avenue project was going to be the last thing that Little Comfort needed, then I would say, yeah, let's put it forth.
Well, their rating is medium-high probability of being delisted.
Correct.
So to me, that's, don't do it.
Well, I think you could, I mean, I don't think there's any,
There's There's more to be done though. That's the thing. And if the MPCA, who does this? PCA? Yes. If this is their rating, not yours, right? This is their rating. So they're telling us that,
An informal
yeah,
discussion, but
yeah,
yes.
but it's precursor
Yes.
to what the full one would be, and they're saying you're not ready yet.
Well,
So,
medium high probability of being delisted is positive.
Correct, right, and that's
I
where.
think, yeah, but I hear what Mike's saying, and I can see the rationale for holding back on this. It might be more difficult to get grants after it's delisted. I don't know, maybe it would be, maybe it wouldn't, but so maybe we should just go with Comfort then and be done with it.
yeah, it's medium-low probability of being delisted. So it's a low probability of being delisted. Okay. All right, just so we're clear on that. Well, so the motion is to just include Comfort, like Big Comfort, on this round. Did we get a second?
Manager Baki did.
Okay, Manager Baki, thank you. Any other questions or concerns? All right, let's do the roll call.
Manager Lowe,
Aye.
Manager Schmaltz,
Aye.
Manager Baki,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
President Anderson.
Aye. All right, moving on, Lower St. Croix Watershed Partnership 10-year plan amendment. This is the carryover from last meeting.
I'm
Yes,
gonna
Madam
go ahead and make
President.
the motion that we approve the Lower St. Croix grant work plan amendment as presented.
Thank you. I like that eagerness.
A second.
Madam President, the only thing that I would note outside of the memo itself is that, the partnership has already reached the 2/3.
That's okay, we can still add ours
Correct,
to it.
right.
That's okay. Is there a second? This
I'll
motion?
second.
Thank you, Manager Taves. Any further discussion? Okay, roll call.
Manager Lowe,
Aye.
Manager Schmaltz,
Aye.
Manager Baki,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
President Anderson.
Aye. D, under old business, standard project signage.
Madam President, managers, this was presented at the last regular meeting, and then there is a recommendation as to, again, this is just the general concept. We do not have any quotes because, we didn't want to spend the time or the resources having that work, paying for that work, that markup or workup rather, until the board had, given any further impact or, feedback rather on that, so.
Okay, well, nobody responded, none of the board responded back with any changes, so this is the one. Can we pull that up?
Yeah.
Bottom of the memo?
Yeah, it's on my screen.
Oh, okay, so.
President Anderson,
Yes,
what's not clear to me in this, is that we have $10,000 in grant funding for Moody Lake capstone project signs and 10,000 in grant funding for the WDJ6. Is that the actual cost for the signage?
I don't know, that's the grant that we got. So they
Right.
have to be spent by, the end of the year, so. They'd like to get going on the bids and then the production.
To,
Yes,
Madam President, Manager Baki, so, that is, so we wrote into the grant. A budget of that dollar amount. And assuming based off of our knowledge of what grants would cost. of the appropriate size so people driving in a vehicle could see them. Assuming also that the company would do the installation, but that's probably in the range of what we would look to spend.
Okay. Does that answer your question?
Well, it just seems like a lot of money for a sign. Sorry.
Well, we don't have to spend that much money.
Right.
What doesn't get spent gets sent back to the state, to Bowser, or whoever we got the grant from.
So in this motion, are we approving the actual signs and without knowing what the cost is?
No, just the concept. We'll work up the prices.
Yeah.
But we did not want to spend money having the company start
Sign.
developing the sign estimate.
And we'll get,
So-
what, 3 bids on the production of the signs?
Okay, that's what I need to know. Thank you.
Yeah,
Typical, yes.
yeah. Okay, any other questions?
Are we selling
Alright.
on this this visual that we have up? Is that the sign we've selected?
That
It's
is
the
the,
style.
yeah. Well, that's
I-
the one.
I don't
Staff
think,
picked.
I think this can have a better design than we have right here. I mean, I was gonna redo the first one that we had here. We got 3 elements to this, what is it? It's a water quality improvement project. The wetland restoration is how it's being done, and then the financial thing at the bottom. And I think that there needs to be some balance in how you spend your space and time on that. And I don't think it's very well done on that particular version. In fact, it doesn't even talk about why we're doing the project. It doesn't even say it's a water quality project. That should be a key element of the 3 points we're trying to make. And only one of the signs had that. And I was gonna redo that, but I ran out of time. So I was gone last weekend and I'm down in Chicago again now for the rest of the weekend. So I'd like to take another shot at it and see if we can get a better, do we have that other design, the first design, which version number 1? Can we look at that?
Find it.
I thought I had sent response in too.
Excuse me?
I thought I had sent response in. Did that not come through?
I've not,
Adam said he did not
yeah,
receive any
Emerson, and I had
responses.
not, do you remember who you sent it to? Did you send it to?
Should we table this and
I think it
move
went
this
to
to the
Adam.
next?
Yeah, I'd like to see us table it, and I'll spend some time on this and redo what I had in mind and send it.
Well, everybody can do that and then send
Right.
your responses in, the week before the next meeting. So that they have it for posting. What is it?
The 5th would be
The 5th of June.
the day of the next special board meeting.
Yeah, and send it to Tori.
No, send it to Adam.
Come on, Tori. Okay, send it to Adam.
Well, let's go with the end of next week, because then we'll have time to.
I'll get it into the board packet, yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
I'm gonna be gone all week in
The 30th.
Illinois, yeah.
Okay, Monday, June 2nd.
I'm coming home on that day. I like the 5th.
Okay. That's second for everybody else.
Yeah, there you go.
Remember, you're not going by the sign in the galloping horse, you're going by in a motor vehicle at 55 miles an hour.
June 4th. I'll have it to you June 4th. How's that sound? Is that a
Okay.
good date? All right, June 4th. We'll table this item and have your comments or redos back to Adam on June 4th. All right, moving along. Report of staff, administrator.
Madam President, managers, we've finally come to the highlight of the meeting. I would like to introduce Catherine Miller. She's our seasonal technician. Catherine, have you been able to stay on for this duration? Thank you for listening and.
She took a nap.
No, she's great. We've really been fortunate that have her on staff. I think she's been picking up very quickly on things, getting out in the field, going through with each individual staff member. But Catherine, go ahead, introduce yourself if you would, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. So I'm Catherine Miller. I just graduated from UW River Falls, and I'm fortunate enough to spend my next 6 months here at the Watershed District. I look forward to learning a lot of new things and maybe even bringing information and skills I've learned in the past to the work that we're doing here.
Welcome. Nice to have you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
And Manager Baki, you'll be very pleased to know that she will soon be a resident of Scandia.
Ooh.
Good choice, Catherine. Good choice.
The best ever, right? Okay, anything else, Mike, from your administrator report?
No, just a reminder that if managers are interested in going to the summer tour up in the far northwest corner, not quite the northwest angle, but pretty close. Please coordinate with Tori. I don't know if any managers are expressing an interest in doing so or not.
Manager Schmaltz,
Yes.
Yes, he should.
I saw that you registered for the Polaris tour. Did you also want me to register you for the entire event?
It said that was a short tour. I wanted to make sure we got on that. So that's why I sent it in right away. I will send you what my plans are, when I get back on Monday. How's that? I mean, Tuesday.
Sounds good.
Okay?
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Thanks, Tori.
I just have one comment. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry. I just had a question for Mike, if you can provide any more details about the Bone Lake South property.
Yes, if we're done with the other, with the summer tour topic. Presently, so we do have, a final, purchase agreement document has been reviewed and in the hands, but there were some requests for some changes. Those have been made and are back in the hands of the owner. So, we had hoped to have received it by yesterday. So we're close. But until we have it in hand, I'm not gonna hold my breath, it's too much, but we did, along that line, in anticipation and given the positive communication that we've had with the owner, district did submit for the last board meeting, another Lessard Sam Phase 2 restoration request for funding. So that's gone in. In fact, how this goes, between the Sunrise River piece, because that we didn't quite get into it, but it does, certainly can let Councilmember Miller here know as well. So district has requested, but between the two will be over $5 million, but for much of the area along the Sunrise from City of Forest Lake north, up towards Comfort Lake is wetland, and so we're looking to, we've been doing some H&H modeling, hydraulic and hydrology modeling, looking at where there are opportunities for wetland restoration, flood mitigation, et cetera. So the program there, and this has been discussed, and we do have a letter of support from the city for those, for that application and that request for funding, similar to what the city had funding for the Headwater South. So it'd be similar in that nature to help with flood mitigation. Much of the area south of Broadway and that Aldi target area historically was entirely a very large wetland complex, and now it's all blacktop and concrete. So that has impacts downstream, and those are some of the things in that the district is trying to collaborate with on the city, or the city of Wyoming as well, to address there. But that grant for the Bone Lake South Phase 2 also went in
Kevin, just in case you don't know about this map, these are our four major sub-watersheds, and the Comfort Lake one is the purple.
Mhm.
And, you can see the line that's going this way across under Wyoming. That is where Washington County is, and then above that is Chisago. So all of that Broadway Avenue area across the freeway and so on, that is all part of Forest Lake. And it's a big, heavy commercial area, so that's what drains down to Comfort. Up to Comfort. All right, so, anything else, Mike?
No, I just included a little flyer on this other piece of research with the University of Minnesota joint project with the city and the watershed district on water quality, or visitor perceptions of water quality. So that'll continue to inform us as lake management individuals and the city from an economic development standpoint, how people perceive Forest Lake.
Okay, I just had one thing, Mike, on the 1001 area for administration. You talk about, I think it's the second bullet. You talk about the board discussed budget priorities for 2026. We were supposed to get a list of those priorities, so if you can ask Emily to put that together for us and get it out to the managers as soon as possible. Thank you. Next, Emmons and Olivera.
Madam President and managers, in addition to what we've already discussed, EOR has been working on the monitoring for the season. Thankfully, we've had some rain the last 2 weeks, and we have a new staff member, Allie Stone, who I worked with at Wank and Stantec. She was the head of our water quality monitoring team that has been started 2 weeks ago, and her second day was out on the Sunrise River, and yesterday was out there too. So she's joined the team and is supporting the water quality monitoring efforts within the watershed district. And as her monitoring season slows down, I'm hoping that she can meet you all in person, and so you can get to know her. We also have been, Bill and Cecilia have been working on the map books for the flood resiliency project. And then we've also been making progress identifying architects to review for the building visioning.
Wonderful.
project.
So next meeting, you'll have a memo maybe for us, just an update on where you're at.
I wasn't scared on that quite yet.
Okay. Well, just an update.
In a future meeting, yeah.
This is a big deal. It's been stretching out over the
Yes.
years, and it would be nice to keep the board up to date as much as possible.
Certainly.
So a quick note, at least at one of our regular monthly meetings, I think would be appropriate. Okay, next is Smith Partners.
Nothing to report, Madam Chair.
Wonderful, thank you. Report of the treasurer.
Okay, thank you. The income for this month was $323,860.22. And most of that was $310,000 from our loan that we received. We have interest income of just under $5,000. And direct expenses for the month will be $492,439.36. So I'd like to, and the bank transfer will be $192,560. So I'd like to ask the board for a motion to pay the expenses for this month.
And do the transfer, right?
I'm sorry, I missed that, the Manager Anderson?
And do the bank transfer.
Right, correct.
Okay, all right. Is that a motion?
Yes, I can make that as a motion.
Okay, very good. Is there a second?
I will second that motion.
Thank you, Manager Baki.
Right, Manager Lowe,
Aye.
Manager Schmaltz,
Aye.
Manager Baki,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
President Anderson.
Aye. Next item is report of officers and managers. Anybody?
Nothing here.
Okay, Manager Baki?
I'll just give you an update as to what's happening on Bone Lake. When the ice went out this year, it dragged a tree from the north end of the lake to the south end. And the tree is now stuck in the bottom of the lake, about 50 feet from shore. And it has raised a lot of concern as to safety for water skiers. We have barefooters who practice on our lake and tubers. So the Bone Lake Association has reached out to the DNR and also to the watershed district asking for some assistance. And it's finally coming back to the Bone Lake Association that we're going to have to spend a little money to take care of this safety issue. I just raise it as another example of how our lake associations play an important role in our lakes, as far as not only being the eyes and the ears, but also paying for things when things need to get done. And there's just no other avenues to go. So just information.
DNR did not say that they could help with that?
Oh, actually, we did. I think Aiden has volunteered to come out with the boat that the watershed district has, which is very small, and he's going to give it his best college try. But it's going to take a lot more than that.
Yeah, I was wondering if the DNR, you said you contacted the DNR? They don't
Yes.
And they're not willing to do anything?
Unless it's impacting the boat landing and it's a safety issue there, we've been told that's the best they can do.
So is that the input portion of Bone? And that's where you get all the water from other sources? I mean,
Melanie,
is it, yeah, is it?
I'm not understanding your question. I'm sorry.
Well, there's an inlet to the lake. Is that near the inlet or the outlet?
The tree is not near the inlet or the outlet. It's just on the south end of the lake, about 50
Okay.
feet from shore. So
Okay, all right.
yeah, just a safety hazard, and people are stepping up and will pay to get it taken care of.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry, there's no help for that.
Well, no,
Well, thank
I'm just sharing this more as information, and this
Sure.
this is what lake associations should do, right? I mean, that's kind of what we're all partners in it. Is what
Yeah,
I'm
but,
saying.
yeah, and I'm just saying with a department as big as DNR, you'd think there would be some type of support coming from that. They get almost 70% of the money that comes into the Clean Water Fund, so it's amazing. All right, thank you. Anyone else? Manager Loth,
I have nothing to report.
thank you. Manager Schmalz?
Nothing to report. Thank you.
Okay, I just wanted to give a quick update. MPCA reached out to me a couple of months ago to serve on a climate, I'm getting it wrong now, but it's a climate, committee or subcommittee for local government units, and that's to feed into their update for their climate plan, and that will be new for 2026. So we're in that process. And we had a meeting this afternoon and it was very interesting, the last two questions they asked. And that was to send to them any projects that we have ready to go, but just need the money to push them. That was number one. And then number two is those projects that we want to do, but haven't started because, again, there's no money for it, no grants that are listed for it. And so they would like to know that too. And so I wanted to pass it on tonight so that, Mike, you can start working with Emily to see, what we can fit into those two kinds of questions. And you too, Ann, you're helping with all of that too, I think. And again, it's projects that we have ready to go, or that preliminary work has been done, but we don't have either all the money or no money to get those pushed into implementation. And then the other one are projects that we would like to do, but haven't started because we haven't found sources for them. And as soon as you can, because Yeah, that was very unusual. So either they've got a source for money or they've got some sitting around.
Yeah.
Okay, very good, thank you. I think that was it.
Summary and approval and board direction.
Yes, Chuck, you're on. Summary and approval or direction.
Madam Chair, I have your reminder to staff to provide a list of budget priorities. And then I just have what you just asked staff to come up with potential projects pursuant to the MPCA invitation.
Wonderful, thank you. And now, who wants to make the motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion that we adjourn.
Thank you, second? Who's gonna second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Manager Baki?
Manager Look,
Aye.
Manager Schmaltz,
Aye.
Manager Baki,
Aye.
Manager Takes,
Aye.
President Anderson.
Aye. Thanks, everyone. We only had to go 10 minutes longer. That's pretty good.
Have a good weekend, holiday weekend, everyone.
President Anderson,
you
is
too.
the city council member still there from Forest Lake?
Yes, right here.
I just want to
Kevin.
thank him for attending and listening in, and hopefully you got the message that we're all concerned about our watershed and that we're all partners in this. So thank you for being here tonight.
On the council, we are as well.
He's our liaison, so we'll see a lot of him coming up.
Wonderful.
Thanks.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Hey.
That was very interesting.
Cory, Cory,
Hey, Cory, yeah.
what time can I come in and sign checks tomorrow?
I will be here as early as 8 AM.
Ooh,
I'll be
thank
there.
you for that.
I'll be there.
Manager Baki, can you be in to do that too? Tomorrow
I
morning?
cannot. I will be leaving tomorrow morning.
Okay,
Sorry.
all right, I'll work it into my schedule. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.